I'm Miriam Schulman, the Communications Director of the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University. I'm pleased to have today Ursula Weinhoven, who is the Head of Policy and Legal at the United Nations Global Compact. She's on campus today speaking with the Center's Business and Organizational Ethics Partnership about business and human rights, and she's going to take a few minutes to talk with us about those issues. We hear a lot in business about compliance, about corporate social responsibility, but human rights is not a term that's often associated with business. Can you talk a little bit about what you think the human rights challenges are for businesses?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. First thing I'd like to say is that I think increasingly we are hearing human rights in association with business. So I think it's happening much more often. And among other things, I think that's because of the 24/7 news cycle that increasingly in our living rooms we're seeing, and on the internet we're seeing instances of corporate human rights abuse splashed across the newspapers, on the internet, etc., on television. So I think this is helping to connect, even in the average person's mind, human rights more with business. But of course, it's not just the negative side. We're also seeing many more businesses taking proactive action to support human rights. So in terms of some of the challenges, it really does vary across sectors. Of course, in theory, all human rights, or virtually all human rights, are potentially relevant to business in the sense that they have the potential to negatively impact all human rights. But I think in terms of looking at what the biggest challenges are, for many businesses it's going to be something around their workers. I mean, every business has workers, so something to do with the employees. The supply chain generally is a huge issue for a lot of companies, and concerns about human rights in the supply chain. And then going industry by industry, for instance, in the high-tech sector, we've seen a lot of issues in terms of scandals about privacy, freedom of expression. With apparel companies, we've seen issues of supply chain and labour standards. And you could go sector by sector like that and highlight some of the main challenges. So it will tend to vary.
I know that in 2008, the UN Human Rights Council accepted something called the Protect, Respect, and Remedy Framework for approaching issues of human rights and transnational corporations. Can you tell us what the main provisions of that framework are?
Sure, absolutely. So what this framework is it outlines the various dimensions of the human rights and business relationship, with a particular view towards what needs to improve in order to create a better situation for people as regards their relationships with business and their human rights are concerned. So the first component, the protect, this is about the government's role, the state's role, and it's talking about the state's duty to protect people from abuses by companies. Of course, states have many other responsibilities and duties as regards human rights, but one of them is definitely about protecting people from abuses by companies. And what's expected of states in that context is regulation, but also use of their soft power to encourage business to do the right thing, and having in place access to remedies so that people who are affected negatively by business have recourse. So that's the state duty to protect. The second pillar is about the corporate responsibility to respect. And what this is about is companies avoiding negative impacts on human rights. And that's negative impacts whether in the workplace, in the marketplace, or in the community. And another way to put that is avoiding infringing the human rights of anyone. The third component is the remedies dimension, and this helps reinforce the first two pillars. It speaks to governments and it also speaks to business in terms of providing remedies and having them be accessible and effective. And it's specifically, I guess, for communities and individuals who've been impacted negatively by business. And the idea is that there's a range of recommendations that are part of that pillar about what can be done to improve access and effectiveness of remedies. So in a nutshell, that's what that framework provides. And specifically for business, the second pillar, what that's asking business to do is to act with due diligence. So in other words, to take care to identify the risks of negatively impacting human rights, and to act so that they mitigate those risks, and also that in the event that negative impacts do occur, to take action to promptly and effectively remediate those.
So you've talked a little bit about this, but can you give us 2 or 3 best practices that businesses should implement to address human rights issues?
Sure, absolutely. So in terms of the due diligence that is expected of companies in order for them to be able to both know and show to others that they are respecting human rights, the kinds of steps that they need to take from a management perspective are things like having in place an explicit commitment on human rights, making sure that they are aware of the potential negative impacts and that they ameliorate those. So that could be through formal impact assessments or other mechanisms to see what gaps they may have in their system for addressing risks, to ensure that those are closed up. Monitoring their progress and communicating their progress to their stakeholders, and having it in place effective procedures so that when concerns arise, people have a place where they can go to raise those with the company.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.